Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Ruben and today we are going to talk about the big ideas from ARKInvest from 2021, and this episode will be about part 9, autonomous ride-hailing. Well, the thesis is that autonomous ride-hailing is likely to dominate urban transport in the future, and ARK believes that it will reduce the cost of mobility to 1/10 the average cost of a taxi that you take today, spurring widespread adoption. Putting this into numbers, for the ride-hailing autonomous platforms, by 2030, companies will generate 1 trillion in profits annually. For the automakers, it will be 250 billion, and for the fleet owners, they are expected to generate $70 billion annually. Autonomous ride-hailing is likely to be affordable. Adjusted for inflation, the cost to own and operate a personal car has not changed since the Model T rolled out of the first assembly line. And the estimation is that at scale, autonomous taxis will cost consumers 25 cents per mile, spurring widespread adoption. And if you look at this graph, they show here the cost per mile of a personally owned vehicle. Well, in 1871 it was $1.70. Then from 1934 to 2016 it is $70. And the expectation is, because of this autonomous taxis, the cost can and will go down, and ARK estimates 25 cents. That's really cheap, if you ask me. Well, Robotaxis should expand the ride-hailing market. The ride-hailing market today generates roughly 150 billion in revenues globally, with take rates of 10 to 30% and margins as high as of 50% in high-performing cities. Likewise, autonomous ride-hailing could generate 50% margins, but its lower price point should expand the total market from 150 billion in revenues, with take rates up to 60% to 6 to 7 trillion by 2030. Well, putting this in a graph, we have the economics of ride-hailing versus autonomous ride-hailing, assuming 3 million vehicles on the network, because you need some economies of scale. On the left, we have ride-hailing in 2020, and the price per mile for the consumer right now is $1.85. Then they put their platform net revenue of $56 with a profit of $28. Then we move to the right in the graph, autonomous ride-hailing, and there they say that the price per mile for the consumer is $1 with a platform net revenue of $50 with a profit of 50%, so you get a profit of 25 cents. Yeah, so one of these amazing companies, also known as Waymo, a subsidiary from Google, they are testing autonomous ride-hailing in practice right now.
Autonomous vehicles, including the one that we took last year, have trained safety drivers in the front seat, until now. It says, "Good morning, Waymo rider. Our destination is Baby K's Cajun Kitchen." It's asking me to start the ride, so let's do that.
Heading to Baby K's Cajun Kitchen. Please make sure your seatbelt is fastened.
All right, so we're pulling out of this this parking lot right now and onto public road. Oh, there goes another Waymo car. As you can see, we're in Waymo Central here. They just waved to us. I don't think they knew that maybe there wasn't anybody in the front seat there. And then we just made a right-hand turn and changed lanes into the center lane. It's very natural. So here we come, some construction right here, which is very challenging for self-driving cars, and it kind of handled it with really no problem at all. It slowed down a little bit, now it's changing lanes, and just kind of breezed past that construction site there as if it was being driven by a human, quite honestly. This is our destination. Nothing really eventful to speak of. Now it's coming back right now, and we're gonna take it for a ride back to where we came from, which is the watershed. Waymo was nice enough to let us choose the pickup spot and the destination for where we're going. We had to vet it with them first, but still, it's nice to know that there's a little bit of dynamic decision-making going on here with this car. I'll get it first, if you don't mind. All our stuff is still here. That's great. You can trust these robots. This time I'm going to press the button up here on the headliner, which is another way that we can get the car to get going. And that was a pretty nice acceleration there, not as cautious as you might maybe expect. It felt very organic. Yeah, that's really really weird seeing the kind of the steering wheel kind of move on its own like that. I like the notice on the steering wheel too, says do not touch steering wheel or pedals, the vehicle will pull over, as sort of a warning to anyone that might try to mess with the driverless car. It looks like we're gonna be taking a right-hand turn here on Henkel, which looks like it's gonna be into some bit of a residential area. So away from sort of the more heavily trafficked commercial zone that we are in and into more of a residential zone. Interesting. So it looks like we're making a little bit of a routing correction. We're going back the way we came, and the car is making some adjustments into the route that it's choosing. Obviously, we'll allow that. We have to make some allowances for a car with nobody in the front seat. It'll be interesting to see how Waymo smooths out some of those things, though, going forward, as this becomes a service that is available to more people. And it looks like we're going to be turning into the left turning lane as we approach our destination. And this is the part where I get a selfie for my own purposes. I'm about to take a left turn in a fully driverless car. We did it. And we're making our way slowly around the parking lot to drop us off at the entrance to the watershed. And then we'll be done, and we will say goodbye to our Waymo. Oh, it stopped for the pigeons. You love to see it. You absolutely love to see them stopping for the pigeons. No other company is testing fully driverless vehicles at the scale and speed that Waymo is. The company has trained its AI with a vast data set of images and driving scenarios. It has a highly detailed, high-def map of the whole area down to the centimeter. It took Waymo a decade to get to this point, where it felt confident enough in the safety of its technology to pull drivers out of the driver's seat. But only for a tightly controlled 50 square mile area, mostly suburban and mostly dry conditions with a pretty basic road layout. And these vehicles aren't totally alone in the wilderness. Waymo has a team of remote employees that watch the real-time feed from each of the vehicle's 8 cameras and can help with the touch of a button if the software runs into a tricky spot and needs a human eye to figure it out.
These folks don't joystick the car or anything like that, but they can help answer specific questions that a car might have about an ambiguous situation. And that's where human intuition and human understanding of the entire context is super important. Like, that moving van, is it really staying there, or is it about to start driving? Well, if the door's down and they're unloading a lamp out of the back, it's going to be there for a while. That's not something we've gotten around to making the car smart enough to understand, but a human sees it in a moment and can send that signal. So it's not really a command to the car, it's just adding information.
When you think about self-driving cars, you probably picture something from like Minority Report or Total Recall.
Can I take you to
Drive fully driverless cars with no one in the front seat, or maybe no front seat at all, or steering wheel for that matter. While Waymo's driverless vehicles are getting us closer to that imagined future, there's still a lot going on behind the scenes that we don't see. I mean, the level of production required for each of these driverless vehicles is immense.
Well, we have 3 autonomous strategies that are evolving right now. Well, Alphabet's Waymo is using LiDAR and HD mapping. Waymo launched its autonomous network in Arizona, but probably will need more time and significant resources to scale nationally. Tesla's approach, on the other hand, is camera-based, so with less accurate sensors than LiDAR, making the path to full autonomy a more difficult problem to solve. Because these cameras, they do not rely on HD maps and should enable a much more scalable service. So Tesla could be the first autonomous taxi network to scale nationally. And third one, China. Well, many Chinese players, including Baidu's Apollo, they are building out infrastructure sensors to help vehicles identify road signs and traffic, requiring large infrastructure investments. And this approach to autonomous ride-hailing seems to be the most rigid and least scalable of all 3. Well, you can put these 3 strategies also in the graph. On the x-axis, we have steps to solving for full autonomy, consisting of 4 parts from the left to the right. The first one is you have to perceive and localize, then prediction, driving, and deciding. On the y-axis, we have flexibility, varying from rigid, limited scalability to flexible, scalable. And then you have 3 different kinds of colors also known as the solution speed. Green is very fast, medium is orange, and slow is red. So if you look at Apollo, they're very good at perceiving and localizing, but when it comes to deciding, they're very slow. If you look at Waymo, they are good at perceiving and localizing and predicting. And for deciding, they have like an orange color, so it's like medium solution speed. And then on the top, Tesla, that's camera based. Perceiving, localizing, and predicting is more slow. But if you move more to deciding, they are close to medium as well. So scalability will determine the pace of autonomous ride-hailing adoption. If Tesla launches its autonomous ride-hailing service successfully in 2022, ARK estimates adoption could approach 20% by 2025. If Waymo or General Motors is successful, adoption probably will be limited to 1% during the next 5 years. If we look at the demand, then the demand response could be higher in developed versus developing countries. Well, ARK believes that autonomous ride-hailing will undercut the cost of human drive ride-hailing by roughly 90% in the United States and 50% in China. As a result, the demand response to inexpensive autonomous travel could be higher in developed countries than in developing countries. And platform providers or companies that own the autonomous technology stack, they should garner the lion's share of autonomous ride-hailing profits. Well, if you put this in a graph, we have human ride-hailing versus autonomous ride-hailing, average price per mile in China and the United States. On the left, we have Didi from 50 cents to $25 with purple color being human ride-hailing and green color being autonomous ride-hailing. The same colors also apply for the ride. For Uber, $2 to $25. That's a decrease of approximately 90%. Tesla is developing full self-driving, also known as FSD, for all of its vehicles. Let's have a look.
I think it did a better job with those pedestrians than I would have driving myself, because they walked out of view to the right and my attention was focused on the situation ahead. Me and the blue car could have both gone at the same time. That's probably what I would have done. Little interesting bit of road here where the lane we're in suddenly ends and it becomes a right-hand turn only lane. Let's just watch this play out. Really nicely done, actually. It saw the lane marking on the ground, which the visualization does display, but unfortunately you can't see here because they're a dark gray color, which gets filtered out with this editing. But it does recognize those lane markings on the ground. Also not having any issues with this yellow flashing warning light up here, so it doesn't slow down at all, which is much improved versus previous firmware versions. That was a pretty uncomfortable merge. I know, like, I looked over way beforehand and knew that there was nobody behind this Audi, so I knew it was going to be fine, but it got closer than I would have, and that was one of those situations where if I was driving normally, I would have disengaged. But the beta did handle it safely. It also has some issues. You can see it slowing way down here. It's having a hard time with these cars parked off to the side of the road that are kind of hanging over into the lane lines as it's taking that blind corner. And just fast forwarding through these parts here, crazy that we're getting to the point where normal roads like this are not even really commentary worthy. It's actually really crazy when you think about it. And let me tell you, it's also really odd reading those news articles lately saying Tesla is behind in full self-driving technology, and it's not even worthy of being called full self-driving, at least while I'm sitting here. I really do hope we see a ton of improvements with version 9 coming up, and that it can be released to a much wider group very soon. Autopilot having a bit of a difficult time with this stop sign ahead that is facing us but is not for us. So it is able to figure it out, but it does slow 10 miles an hour first. Apologies for the reflections on the left there. I'm still figuring out how to display these visualizations the best that I can. Elon has also said the visualizations are going to be changing in version 9 to give a better representation of what the neural network is seeing or something like that. So no idea what that means, but hopefully it's colorful so I can keep displaying them like this for you guys. I know it is a lot easier to see when it takes up this much of the screen. All right, another little bit of an uncomfortable situation. I saw this one coming a mile away, where the van is parked off to the side of the road and there's an oncoming car. So autopilot sees it can fit through the gap and just does it, where I would have slowed down and kind of waited for more of space. I definitely wouldn't have threaded that needle. So we are coming up to an intersection where both roads to our right and left are closed off for pedestrian use only. So we have a ton of pedestrians walking around in this little intersection here. Autopilot doing a really nice job waiting for all these pedestrians and not creeping forward or doing anything like that. Just stays very patient. You can see this guy to the left, the color of his visualization changes as soon as he comes to a complete stop and autopilot continues. I thought that was so cool. Like, that was a very human thing to do, to like stop while you're walking at a stop sign to let cross traffic through. And I'm really surprised that autopilot proceeded and actually knew what to do. I'm going to let this next stop sign play out because it showcases some of autopilot's weaknesses for the stop signs right now. First off, it's very hesitant to proceed forward. It kind of waits for the car to completely clear the intersection. And you see this car to our left also taking the right of way, and autopilot gets nervous. It's kind of like if there's any cars moving around us in our general vicinity, autopilot just proceeds very slowly, which is not what traffic in San Francisco expects. But I do understand the reasons why, and I prefer safe and slow any day over trying to rush through a stop sign and doing something crazy. Going to have to creep pretty far forward here to get visibility past this line of trees. The creeping behavior is another thing that's not super consistent in this version. Sometimes it does pretty well like you see here, and other times it's a lot twitchier. I also feel like it's hard to know when it's committing to moving or if it's just creeping further. Like I can't feel what it's doing, if that makes any sense. Coming up here is another thing that I hope that gets fixed in version 9, which is autopilot's path planning indecisiveness. If you look ahead, it's splitting this in between two lanes, and it just can't figure out what lane it wants to be in. It wants to be in the right one, it wants to be in the left one, it wants to be in the right one. So it kind of like drives in the middle here, almost gets on the wrong lane coming through this intersection, but then straightens itself out. It's like, it just feels very indecisive, and you can kind of like see that in the steering wheel, how shaky it is. It's like neural networks fighting each other to figure out the direction the car should go. So I hope it gains some more confidence and we see that smoothed out.
To conclude, sizing the opportunity, ARK believes that autonomous ride-hailing platforms could generate more than $1 trillion in operating earnings annually by 2030. Auto manufacturers with successful electric vehicle platforms partnered with autonomous technology providers could generate roughly $250 billion in earnings annually by 2030. Fleet owners that own and maintain autonomous ride-hailing vehicles, they could generate roughly $70 billion in earnings annually by 2030. Enterprise value for autonomous platform operators could scale to $3.8 trillion by 2025. Thank you everyone for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it and that you actually learned something, and see you on the next part.